All right, this lecture we're going to be covering toddler development, nutrition, and health promotion. A toddler is generally defined as a child between the ages of 12 months and 36 months. So this age is all about exploring, and one of the major tasks for toddlers is to learn how to be independent. And this is why toddlers insist on doing things on their own and love to say no. So toddlers are in the stage of autonomy versus shame and doubt. They begin to realize their will and their control over others. And toddlers have this continual internal debate over like exercising this will, but also they still want to enjoy dependence and security from their caregivers. The doubt and shame component enters when a child is continually reprimanded or stopped from exerting their own will. And so it really is a tricky balance trying to foster independence in a safe place with boundaries. And parents struggle a lot with this stage. Negativism is another important part of their psychosocial development and is defined as persistent negative responses to requests. But it's the only control they have, right? And this is why in the hospital, you as students are encouraged to use firm boundaries and only provide appropriate choices to a child this age, because they can and will say no at every opportunity just because they can. And then in the hospital, when they are even in less control, that tends to come up even more and a little bit more forcefully for them. Routines work well to combat some of this, as they allow the child the independence and the sense of autonomy that they crave. If they know the steps to getting ready for school in the morning or for daycare, they can start to do some of those things on their own and fulfill that need that they have. So this is a good rundown of toddler highlights. Toilet training comes into the forefront as they can now physiologically control their bladder and their bowel, and they have interest in doing this task on their own. Being able to choose food and clothing is also a small way that toddlers can control their world. Pickiness is a result of this sometimes. We mentioned no already, but I cannot emphasize it enough. If you've ever babysat a toddler or if you have younger siblings, you probably are well aware of this phenomenon already. At this stage, toddlers are super into experimentation. Okay, for their cognitive development, it is a really big part. They use their new skills with their previous learning, and then they observe the results. So they're essentially little scientists. They straddle the end of the sensory motor phase and the beginning of pre-operational. So 13 to 18-month-old toddlers may repeat actions to see if the result is the same, like flipping a light switch, right? If I flip the light switch in this room, will it turn on the light over here? This can annoy parents to no end, but there is a purpose to it. By 19 to 24 months, they are going to actively search for objects that are in a potential hiding place, rather than just knowing it's out of sight because you put it behind a pillow. So they could go into another room and recall that a toy was in bed there at some point, and they will check to see if it's still there. They will also mimic adult tasks like cleaning, housework, and yard work. As they move toward the age of 2, they will begin to finally wait for something rather than relying so much on instant gratification. So this is where statements such as, we're not going to have that for snack right now, but you can have it for dessert later might work. Sometimes it doesn't, because you're still up against that need for control and autonomy, but they can understand that not everything that they want or need is going to happen right away. If grandma or grandpa is coming over tomorrow, they know that that's not necessarily right now, and they're starting to understand that delayed gratification part. They are quite egocentric at this age, and they will also tend to focus on one aspect of an object or a situation, which is called centration. So this is seen when you get a banana for a child and you cut it in half because you think that you're helping, and now it's deemed completely unacceptable by that child because the banana is no longer whole. Or they might love cheese, but only yellow cheese because it's not the same cheese if it's white. This can be really frustrating for adults who don't understand why it's a big deal, and to these children, it is a very big deal. With animism, they might do something like apologize to a toy if their toy car crashes into something, or they start to, treat their stuffed animals as alive and having feelings. Socially, we begin to see separation and individualization, and these kind of work hand in hand. The ritual of separating and reuniting with a child this age actually helps cement this concept and eventually helps them to be more prepared for school. You will see this in their play. They will often wander farther away than they once did, knowing that their parent is still waiting for them. As for the individualization, toddlers want to be their own person, and so they begin to identify achievements and objects that can help them still feel safe and protected while venturing out to be the little independent humans that they want to be. Transitional objects, by the way, can be stuffies, but they could also just be trucks, or they could be a piece of paper. There was a time where one of my daughters had a pen, and that pen had to go everywhere with her. Could she write with it? No, but that pen somehow signified home and a safe place for her, and she carried the pen around for a little bit until she transferred that need to something else. So don't judge. Anything can be a transitional object. Speech also explodes at this time. At 12 months of age, they have about 3 to 5 words, but by 2, they have increased that to 50. Okay, so it's really exponential. Their comprehension also increases, and it's often it often includes a lot more than they can actually express. So conversations at this age are really important for their learning. And that's actual conversations with adults in their life rather than taking in passively in television or screens. It's still really important to talk to these kids and to use full sentences and, speak to them in a way that they're going to sort of model after. A 1-year-old child will use a 1-word phrase, while a 2-year-old child will use a 2-word phrase. So easy memorization there. They may transition, from mama to mama go, for example. So what about motor development? So this slows a bit, you're welcome, compared to the first year. The asterisks there are the ones to really focus on. 12 months, they're walking and they're doing 2 cube towers. By 18 months, they're getting into that overhand throw and building a 3 to 4 cube tower. This stage of 18 months to about 2.5 years is sometimes called the age of maximum effort, like in Montessori, because these kids love to pull and push and use all their strength to manipulate things, and they will often be able to conquer more physical tasks because they're just so willing to try. By 2 years, they are running and they are turning doorknobs, as well as building 6 to 7 cube towers. And then by 2.5, they can jump with both feet and they can draw a circle. So play is the work of children, but toddlers especially. This is where they learn everything, how to interact with people, how to interact with the world around them. It becomes very important. As toddlers, they're still engaging in parallel play. So they're not interacting with each other, but one child may be working on a puzzle while the other one is stacking some blocks. Imitation, we've discussed already, in the form of mimicry, of doing adult tasks as play. And then for tactile play, this is things like ride on toys, anything that really is sensory for them. Slides, swings, playing with things like water or sand or music all provide a lot of great stimulation for toddlers. And so as far as anticipatory guidance goes, we really want to guide parents into the selection of appropriate toys for this age group to allow these children a safe way to express their developmental needs, but also to remain safe. So that is all for this section of toddlers. Hope you guys have a great day. Hello and welcome to the presentation on toddler health promotion. We'll be covering preventative visits, sleep, dental, and safety considerations for toddlers. So this is the schedule of preventative visits during the toddler years. We have 18 months, 24 months, and 36 months. So the first thing you should notice is this is much less frequent than during the first year of life. This schedule is created around the immunization schedule. Additionally, at each visit, the provider may have parents fill out an ages and stages questionnaire, or ASQ, to assess development, or another similar developmental test. They will measure their height, their weight, their head circumference, and do a physical exam. And then at one of these visits, usually the 18 or 24-month visit, they'll evaluate whether or not the child needs a lead test. So this screening is done on children that are considered high risk between the ages of 1 and 2, and then on most children between the ages of 3 and 5. And your risk is usually calculated based on whether or not you're in an older home that might have lead-based paint, or if you are living in a geographical location that might be at higher risk to lead exposure. If you remember Flint, Michigan, where there was lead in their water, obviously that location would be considered high risk and all children there would be screened. And the reason that we screen in children and also in older adults is because their brains and nervous system are more vulnerable. And for children, they are still developing. So they have more adverse outcomes to any sort of exposure to lead. Sleep is another part of health promotion for education of toddlers. Most children from the ages of 1 to 2 years will drop from 2 naps a day to 1 nap. And their total sleep in a 24-hour period would be about 11 to 12 hours. And then by school age, that's usually when they will drop their naps. But some children will drop earlier, and even if they do not want to go down and sleep for a nap, it's important for them to have rest time during the afternoon, just to have a period to kind of be calm and decompress. It gives them some independent time away from the chaos of the family, and then helps them to really rejuvenate for the evening. Sleep problems at this age are often varied. Behavioral sleep resistance is extremely common in toddlers. They usually don't want to go to bed, or they might not want to take naps. So having a good routine and sticking to it can really help them anticipate when those nap and bedtimes are coming, but also evaluating any issues that surround that time. Is it too early? Are they not tired enough, or even overtired? I don't know if you've heard the saying sleep begets sleep. It's often mentioned more in the infants, but even for toddlers as well. It seems counterintuitive, but oftentimes a child that has not gotten enough sleep will have trouble actually going to sleep. As far as sleeping situations go, toddlers should fall asleep on their own, in their own sleep space. And if they are sleep deprived for any reason, you will see behavior changes, such as impaired learning or really strong emotions or mood swings, increasing tantrums, and lots of really impulsive behavior. When we talk about dental health, children should really have a dental home by 1 year or within 6 months of getting their first tooth. By the time they're 1, a toddler should be brushing their teeth at home using a fluoride toothpaste. We do recommend a very small amount, because at this age, toddlers usually don't spit their toothpaste out. So a pea-sized amount is important because they're going to be swallowing it. One way that you can incorporate that need for independence in a toddler into toothbrushing, and to make it more pleasurable for them, is to let them brush first. But obviously they don't have the skills to do a really great job, so then the parent can jump in and finish for them. But that continual exposure to toothbrushing and the dentist's office is really important. When they do go to the dentist, they're not necessarily going to do a full exam for a while, but that repetitive exposure helps to make the child more comfortable. Safety is a huge part of toddlerhood as well. They're more mobile and more accident prone because they're not as aware of danger as they are of wanting to explore their environment and wanting to use their physical skills. Another big safety concern is drowning. It's important to ensure that they are never alone around water, because even an inch of water can cause a problem. Early swim lessons, as well as constant supervision, even in shallow water, should be encouraged to parents. As for motor vehicle safety, toddlers should still be in a car seat. In the state of Illinois, they should be rear facing until they are 2, but ideally rear face as long as possible until they outgrow the recommendations for the car seat. I've seen pictures of 4, 5, 6-year-old kids, with their knees kind of up and bent because they're getting so tall, but they're still rear facing because it's just the safest position for them to be, because then the impact of the force of the car braking puts them against the seat back rather than whipping them forward where they don't have any support. Motor vehicle accidents are actually one of the most common causes of accidental or unintentional death in children between the ages of 1 and 4, and it's usually because they're not properly restrained. So educating parents about resources regarding car seat installation, car seat checks, you can usually go to the fire department or a child safety technician. Those things are really important. Accidental poisonings also become really common in this age range because they're able to get into cabinets and open bottles. It's very important to tell parents that all the chemicals and cleaning products in the house should be locked up. All the pills, even at grandma's house, aunt's, uncle's house, those should all be removed. Most of the overdoses that I have seen in the hospital are from unsecured adult medications like metformin or blood pressure medications. Toddlers are surprisingly fast and agile, and they will get into things that you don't think that they are capable of getting into. Burns are also a safety concern in this age because they like to start turning knobs. And so one of the more common places for this to happen is in the bathtub, where they might turn that hot water on all the way and then turn the cold water off, and they'll get burns from that hot water. So a good way to prevent that is to make sure that your hot water heaters are set below 120 degrees. And then making sure of stove safety, that the handles of pots aren't hanging over the edge so that children can get to them. I remember even when I was a kid, there was like this really animated cartoon on TV. It was like a PSA where like they showed all of the, I think they were animated pots or something, and they would like all turn their own handles away from like facing out of the, over the edge of the stove. Because, they can grab them and then they can dump the boiling water all over themselves. Choking is also still an issue at this age. Toddlers love to put things in their mouths, so making sure that the toys they have are an appropriate size. We're still cutting grapes, chopping things into small pieces, not letting them eat whole hot dogs, that sort of thing. And then finally, falls. Toddlers don't realize the danger, and a lot of toddlers really like to explore to the extent of their physical ability by climbing higher and farther than they ever have. So just make sure that they're being properly supervised and allowing them to extend themselves in a way that is both developmentally beneficial but also safe. And finally, I'm going to end this lecture with a video of my girls. When Addie, my youngest, began walking at 13 months, just to kind of show you how unstable she was on her feet and the frequency of the falls that occur. This was at a hotel, gross floors and all, and just for age reference, Emmy is 3.5 here. And spoiler alert, Addie does hurt herself at the end, and you can kind of see it coming, but she's fine. She does not remember this incident at all, so everything is okay. But
Slow,
I will show this to you guys.
You gotta wait for her to stand up all the way. Come back. Okay, go slow. There, perfect. Look at that, Emmy. You see how slow you're going? Okay, go slow. And stop. Perfect. And let her get down. You see how slow you're going? Or turn around slowly. You have to like walk in a little circle. Good. Look at how good you are now, Emmy. Nope, slower, slower. Slow down.
Obviously, listening skills were not great here either.
Slow down. Slow. Slow. You cannot start running, Emmy. That's not fair. Go. Slow. You cannot start running, Emmy. The problem is now Addie's just always going to try to grab onto the back of Emmy whenever she's... Oh, careful! The problem is now Addie's just always
Addie, you having fun?
Slower, slower.
And that concludes the lecture on toddler safety. I will see everybody next time. Have a great day. Hello, everybody. This lecture is going to be covering typical concerns related to the toddler. So we're going to start with toilet training. Toilet training is a huge focus of the toddler years for parents who are ecstatic to stop changing diapers. The physiologic control of the sphincter happens after the child can walk, and it's really thought to happen between 18 and 24 months. However, in the US, only about half of toddlers are trained by the age of 36 months. So there's 4 general signs that we look for to show readiness to begin toilet training. There's no magical right age, but our job is to help parents to be able to recognize when their child's ready. So the signs of readiness are waking up dry from a nap or overnight, the child's awareness that they need to go, okay? The child being able to communicate their needs, and they're staying dry for at least 2 hours during the day. Now, nighttime bladder control comes much later than daytime control, and bedwetting is actually quite normal in girls up to about the age of 4 and about until the age of 5 years in boys. As an example, my daughter just turned 8 this summer, 2024, and she just stayed dry overnight in February at 7.5. Some of that was behavioral on her part, but nobody was concerned, and she's dry now and everything is fine. She's not going to high school wearing diapers, right? So there's a multitude of different methods that you can use to toilet train a child, but the most important part to remember is that we want to be positive and supportive with that child and supportive of the parent as the healthcare providers and nurses working with those families. You want to make the experience positive for that child, right? Children will have many more issues if they have a negative experience or there's a lot of shaming involved in toilet training. Intentional holding, for example, can lead to chronic constipation as kids get older, and this is often originated when shame is developed around those bowel movements. So what about temper tantrums? So the stage of toddlerhood that gives us this term is the terrible twos, right? Toddlers have very poor impulse control. They're also learning how to exert their own independence. So as they try to practice this new skill, and then we tell them to stop something, they're not always able to stop that impulse to do it again, which leads to the parents getting frustrated. And a toddler gets frustrated as well, but that often comes out in violent objection. Okay, so tantrums can look very different depending on the kid. Some kids will lie down on the floor and scream. Other kids will run off. Some will even hold their breath. Now, I have actually never seen this in the wild, but children do tend to find this really effective because parents will get anxious when they're not breathing and will quickly give in to what they want so that that child will start breathing again. And then that reinforces the behavior. So the advice is actually to stay really firm, because eventually that child will faint as their oxygen levels drop and their CO2 goes up. But as soon as this happens, they will start breathing again. And so it seems scary and harsh to allow this to happen, but it actually doesn't cause any long-term harm to the child, but it really is the only way to stop the behavior. There are hundreds of books on child behavior these days, as well as experts on social media, and much of it really boils down to the same ideas, right? We want to keep firm limits. We want to have developmentally appropriate expectations, right? A younger toddler doesn't have the language to express frustration, and so they will use behavior instead. Parents need to be consistent in their approach, right? Don't move those goalposts, and to stay calm. A tantrum is just a good kid having a hard time. And our job as the adult is to model that regulation and guide them through those rough moments. So early on, this teaches them boundaries, right? And as they get older, it also teaches them that their emotions aren't out of control and unmanageable to the adults around them. So no, no, no. Okay, that is the frequent refrain of toddlers. And as frustrating as this can be to parents and caregivers, it is simply how they exert their own self-control. One way to help them to do this is to minimize the opportunity for them to say no. So don't ask a toddler if they want to do something that you need them to do, right? Do you want to go to preschool today? You've presented an opportunity now for them to say no. So when you're at clinical as a student, one example of this is don't ask if you can listen to their heart. Ask them, do you want me to listen to your heart or your lungs first? And that way the answer isn't no, and you're giving them some choice. You know, which one do you want? Now, let's be real. There are kids that will still say no. My child, my 8-year-old, is a perfect example of this. Choices never worked for her, even up until recently. Sometimes they will still say no, at which point then we go back to asserting those boundaries, right, and letting them know that certain things have to happen, but they have control in the way that they will happen. A similar example, you know, for blood pressure, you don't want to ask a toddler, you know, can we check your blood pressure? You definitely don't want to say, can we take your blood pressure, right? Because going back to that developmental stuff that we've been going over, taking something is very literal to a child, and they're going to think that you're actually removing something, right? Measure your blood pressure, test your blood pressure, any other thing like that. In the hospital, these kids have had this done usually by the time you care for them. So don't get super caught up on the language. These are guidelines, guys. Okay, you're not going to make or break anything by falling off script. I don't want you to be super stressed, but these are tools that you can have to help make those experiences go more smoothly. Okay, and that's not saying they won't be smooth if you mess up. They absolutely will be. Okay. But what you can do is say, you know, we have to check your blood pressure now. Do you want to use your right arm or your left arm? And they can still make that choice and feel autonomous, and you're still getting what you need accomplished. Most importantly, never give a toddler an option that is not available. All right. Don't ask them if they want to do something if they have to do it. You are going to ruin the rapport that you have built with them. They aren't going to feel that they can trust you. So don't ask them if they want to take a medication or if they want to be assessed, because those things just have to happen. So giving them choices that are available to them instead is really important. Moving on to toddler nutrition. So this is really an age of exploration for these children, but also the age of very picky eaters. So I find this picture, actually, I took this picture from a previous lecture, and these are things a toddler would actually never eat. Like, these are herbs, and I guarantee that bland food is the way to go with some of these kids. So I find this to be an interesting photo choice, but I kept it because I thought it was funny. So this can be a really challenging age for parents because there's such a big change from the infant where they were open to more flavors at that time and it was really exciting and they wanted to try all these different foods and you were generally able to get them to do that. Toddlers will typically eat 3 meals a day and 2 snacks. So ideally, you want them to eat a variety of vegetables and fruits and proteins and whole grains following the My Plate guidance. But what typically happens is around 18 months of age, children don't actually need to eat as much. And so they have a decreased nutritional need. And then when they don't eat as much, parents get concerned, right? But it's normal for them to have what we would call physiologic anorexia, okay? It's an important term to be familiar with. Hint, hint. They're just not as hungry at that age because they're starting to slow down in their growth a little bit. And often around the same time, toddlers will also, because nothing is easy, become very picky with very strong preferences. So they become much more aware developmentally of those pleasure parts surrounding the social aspect of eating and the control that they have over what they eat. And they also can become really picky about things like which bowls or plates or cups that they use and not wanting food to touch on their plates. So it can be a really fun time for parents, if you can imagine. They should be able to drink from a cup at this point with minimal spilling by about 18 months of age, and they should be able to use spoons and forks, although they might still prefer to use their fingers because it's faster and easier. But they need to be exposed to and be able to use those utensils. One way that you can also help encourage toddlers to eat is not serving large portions. There have actually been studies that show that if you give them smaller amounts, they're likely to ask for more and then eat more than if you start with the amount you want them to have and they're overwhelmed by the amount on their plate. So typically we're looking at about 1/4 to 1/3 of an adult portion, and then that will prevent that feeling of overwhelm. Serving them diverse meals and allowing them some control also helps. You could ask them, would you like your broccoli on this side or this side of your plate? Having them serve themselves or help in the kitchen as far as keeping that developmentally appropriate and safe could also get them invested and have a little bit more buy-in into eating the food that's prepared. By this age, cow's milk usually becomes the main source of calcium and phosphorus. So from ages 1 to 2, children should consume about 2 to 3 servings of milk per day, but you don't want them to have more than about 1/4, okay? Too much milk can lead to less eating of solid food because they don't feel hungry. And it can also lead to iron deficiency anemia, which we'll talk more in depth in the hematology lecture later this semester. But it's very common for children of this age to overdrink dairy and milk, and then they will not eat those diverse amount of foods that we want them to eat. With that said, around the age of 2, we can transition from whole fat to low fat milk as their need for fats in their diet isn't as great.